Hi, I'm John F. Allen.
And I'm R.J. Sullivan.
And we're the Two Towers.
Greetings and welcome to the Two Towers Talk Show. I'm your host, Tower 1, John F. Allen.
And I'm Tower 2, R.J. Sullivan.
Today we are going to be discussing and reviewing the Orville Season 2. So, as you've probably heard from our review and discussion of Season 1, that RJ came in to this show with a lot of chips on shoulders and a lot of trepidation, probably to say the least. And I came in with a more open mind. And by the end of it all, I think we both agreed that the show turned out pretty well.
We would agree on that.
So, that being said, we are going to talk about this. I'm going to just do a little recap of the show. Again, the Orville is a comedic homage to Star Trek, specifically The Next Generation, which originally aired on Fox, and the show is set 400 years in the future and follows the adventures of the Orville, a not-so-top-of-the-line exploratory ship in Earth's interstellar fleet. It faces cosmic challenges from without and within by a motley crew of space explorers who will boldly go where no comedic drama has ever gone before. And with that all being said, let's talk about how this particular show, although it is a homage to Star Trek, specifically The Next Generation, is finding its own footing and finding its own production value as its own thing. Let's explore that. What you got, RJ?
All right. Well, I think something had happened to this show at some point. Something I didn't expect, and something I think I was seeing on my Facebook wall. Agree. See if you agree with me on this. People were regarding Orville as almost like its own Star Trek-like show. And what I mean by that is, in some ways, I started to get a sense that the Orville understood Star Trek better than Star Trek understands Star Trek. By what I mean by that is what Star Trek original was and why Star Trek worked. You know, I stand of the opinion that what Star Trek is now is very different from how it started. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just that it's very different. The Orville looks back with fondness at how the show started and is a combination of what the Next Gen and what the old show was, and also finds ways to take that formula and move it into the future. And what I mean by that formula, when CBS announced that they were going to put out a new Star Trek show a few years ago, I was very surprised, because to me this should have been a no-brainer. You push show forward 50, 60 years, you bring in modern technology, but you just create another exploratory starship, you put on another crew, and you focus on the concerns of today as opposed to the concerns of the 60s or the 80s. You talk about the hot topics of the 21st century as opposed to whatever were the hot topics at the time. To me, that was simple. I think one of the biggest things that Star Trek is missing now is the hour-long story, the episode of the week. I think a lot of the charm of The Next Generation is that you can pop one on. It can be in a random order. Yeah, there is some character growth and continuity. It was very loose and very slow. So there was no feeling that you were dropping into the middle of something that you had to kind of catch up on or back up on, or this continuing saga thing, which I think is a concept of modern television, I think has given us a weaker Star Trek show. I think it's very strong for other science fiction. It's very strong for more modern stuff. But I think what I love as a Star Trek fan is being able to watch an hour-long morality play and then go on with my day. And I think what Orville does right, and what I was understanding it to do right by now, is it got that. You know, we're exploring strange new worlds. We're making new friends. You don't always have to be a spectacle, although they were capable of being a spectacle when they needed to. But the idea of, episode 6 is my favorite episode, and I just made that up. I don't know. It might be. But, say if episode 6 was your favorite episode, you pop it on, you can watch it, you're done. You can show it to a friend. You don't have to explain the background. You don't have to explain all the different things about the characters. You didn't feel like you were dropping into the middle chapter of a bigger story. And I think that is key to what made Star Trek so popular in the first place, and the one thing that the Orville really got right off the bat and continues to understand. And I hope that doesn't change. I'm less interested in series like Picard and Discovery, and I'm sure they're strong shows, but this idea of watching a 15-chapter novel for television, it works so well, modern streaming services, but to me, they're missing a key component of what made Star Trek so special, which the Orville absolutely gets and has been sticking to for 2 years and hopefully counting. So I wanted to get that out there. That was one of the things that most impresses me about the Orville and its approach to storytelling.
Yes, I tend to agree with that sentiment. Basically, every now and again on the Next Generation and other shows that came after the original series, there were 2-part episodes, or there was a cliffhanger at the end of the season, which is to be expected. But definitely, like you said, you pretty much got a episode, you pop it in, or you watch it, and then, you're good. And that's something that is done with the Orville, and these other shows, not so much anymore. I will say this about Picard, that despite the fact that they did do that, I was still intrigued. I think of the modern actual official Star Trek shows, that's my favorite between that and Discovery. And I just wanted to say that as a side note, just because it brought back some of the characters from the Next Generation, did a good job. Yeah. But that being said, back to the Orville, which is a topic of discussion here. Yes, I concur that the individual stories within the episode were great. It does build upon each episode, but I think that what the Orville does is that it builds more up on the character development as opposed to the actual storyline, so that you don't have to have watched the previous episode to understand what's going on, and it can kind of fill you in as you go, but you're pretty much invested in the characters and what they're doing. Almost like the setting is almost like window dressing, but not quite. It's more integral than that. But the character development in this show, to me, has been one of the things that has drawn me to the show and has me pumped season after season. Yeah. And speaking of season after season, let's talk about the Orville being on the move. Yeah. So the Orville is moving from Fox to Hulu. Now, this is interesting in a lot of ways. So last year at San Diego Comic-Con, Seth MacFarlane announced that the Orville will air exclusively on Hulu rather than on Fox, which it has done for its first 2 seasons. Now, this is interesting for a lot of reasons, but let's look at what MacFarlane said was the reason for him. He said, basically, the current workload and length of time it takes for him to finish the shows and numerous special effects sequences would have meant that season 3 would not have been ready for a mid-season debut. New episodes are now expected to launch on Hulu at the end of 2020. And you can, as in our previous episode, you can stream seasons 1 and 2 on Hulu right now. Now, what's interesting to note about Hulu and Fox is that they are both partial. Well, Fox is completely owned by Disney, and Hulu is majorly owned by Disney. Interesting. As people who are aware of the mergers that Disney, the companies that Disney acquired over the past 5 years would be the Star Wars franchises and all the Star Wars properties and Fox. So the Orville was produced by 20th Century Fox Television and MacFarlane's Fuzzy Door Productions when it first started. But in the wake of the Fox-Disney merger, 20th Century Fox Television has become a part of Disney. And while the Fox Entertainment became part of a standalone entity called Fox Corp, shortly after the merger closed, it was announced that Disney would assume full operational control of Hulu within 5 years. And Comcast, who owns a portion of Hulu, has apparently agreed to sell their stake to Disney for at least $5.8 billion. Now, this gives Disney the variety that they need. As you know, they have the Disney Plus streaming channel, which is where Marvel and their traditional Disney shows and films and Star Wars live, along with The Simpsons, believe it or not. But
I think more Fox shows will be coming over there shortly.
Yes, and that is what makes this so very much of an interest to me, because now they have a platform for some of the stuff that doesn't quite fit in with the House of the Mouse. And, you know, you're not going to see Homer Simpson and Mickey Mouse, you know, palling around. I don't want to see that. But, you know, that all being said, now Hulu, which usually has a little bit more adult content anyway, can have this show and others from the Fox stable, as it were, airing over there. And so I think that this is a good division and diversification of properties that Disney now owns. And I think that that's a very interesting development for the Orville. What do you think, RJ?
Well, I have mixed feelings. You know, when Star Trek got put behind a paywall, so I had mixed feelings on the idea of Orville going to Hulu exclusively. It kind of annoyed me the way CBS All Access used Star Trek as kind of bait to get people to join a service that I know a lot of people otherwise didn't want to see put behind a paywall. Hulu is a bit different for me in that their content is varied enough in that it's certainly not a stress for me personally to get Hulu, because I already have it anyway, so that's fine. It's a well established. I think it's one of the first streaming services, if not the first, that most people felt they needed to get, along with Netflix. But I do think that in an ideal world, I'd like to see the Orville episodes air on the Fox station first, because I just think that people who otherwise don't have streaming services should have access to something Star Trek-like. I think that I feel that way about Star Trek in general. I think it's a good enough show, and there seems to be an attitude now that some things should just be on streaming and other things shouldn't, and I don't get that. And I think that it would make me feel like more people would have access to it if they had it on the air. I also think if I'm not mistaken, this show was doing extremely well in the ratings, and I would like to see Fox continue to kind of dangle their little prize in front of CBS and Paramount and go, look, we're outdoing you guys, and we're getting high ratings for it. So I find it a little bit baffling, and I also have concerns that, this could all eventually someday get locked up in the Disney Plus platform, which I guess is fine. But this stuff is starting to get very complicated, and I don't think it needs to be. I'm just glad that they're not using it to start some sort of, say, a Fox platform, so where you have to get another service entirely to watch it. Because I think they could have done that if that's what they chose to do. I'm glad that they're not. But all things being equal, moving to Hulu, not a big deal. I kind of like the idea of shows being accessible to as many people as possible, and I think this kind of hinders that to a point.
Well, I can certainly see your point, but I kind of disagree to a certain extent. I think that this is a move that makes sense to me, as Disney owns ABC, and ABC shows are shown almost exclusively on Hulu, and they own Fox. And Fox shows are shown almost exclusively on Hulu, with the exception of course, The Simpsons and a couple of others. But since, the Fox shows that were a part of the Marvel staple are going to be under the Marvel studios now, that's going to be a different thing. And I think having the ABC and the Fox shows at Hulu makes more sense from a diversification standpoint. And since people already are invested in Hulu now, it just means that, they're going to be able to see this show and other shows, such as the ABC stable of shows, without having to go out here and get yet another platform. And I think that they are thinking down the lines that they don't want Disney Plus to be too crowded, which makes sense. And then having to not only have Disney Plus, but then Hulu and then another Fox streaming service. They're trying to consolidate and diversify at the same time. And I think that this is something that, to me, makes a lot of sense. If it were me, I would probably have the two platforms of Hulu and Disney Plus, and have the ABC and Fox shows on Hulu, and have the Disney Marvel Star Wars stuff on Disney Plus. Since these are two platforms that most people are chomping at the bit to have anyway. That's how I look at it. It doesn't bother me, or even, have any, give me any type of thought about it anyway, other than I'm just glad that we're getting a season 3. And so
there's that for sure.
Yeah. So let's dive into it, unless you had something else you wanted to add.
No, that's pretty much it. I just think for people that for whatever reason can't streaming services, I think that having a quality show out over the air, or just available, not a bad thing. And I wish and I'd like for this to be one of them, but apparently this 3 will not be one of those shows.
Yeah.
And that's, that is what it is. Just glad we're getting a 3rd season.
Precisely.
The Two Towers Talk Show is sponsored in part by OG Nerds, a new social media community dedicated to nerds of a certain age, 40 and over, although all are welcome. Members are encouraged to share articles and links on their favorite nerdy topics such as animation, anime, art, books, writing, comics, manga, movies, music, sports, tech, science, TV, video games, RPGs, and more. Be sure to visit them on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
The Two Towers Talk Show is sponsored in part by Showtime Cinema in Mooresville, Indiana.
Their friendly staff is always willing to go the extra mile to make your movie-going experience an enjoyable and memorable one. Enjoy the comfort of their new cushioned seating in their spacious auditoriums, and while you're there, be sure to stop by the concession stand and purchase some popcorn where real butter topping is an option. They're located at 300 South Bridge Street in Mooresville, Indiana. We hope to see you at the movies.